introduction for this
Well,
story?
I know Suge from 1995 when he was a partner of mine in a club in Las Vegas, and a lot of urban legends about him, but he and Tupac actually were partners of mine in a club in Vegas, and I never had any beefs with him. He was always a gentleman with me, but understand something. There's a lot of urban legends out there about him with Vanilla Ice and all these other stories. Suge has 2 major felony convictions. This is a third strike for him. This is going to result, if it's a conviction, to life in prison for him. So that's for starters. 2, he has spent a lot of time in prison. He has been in prison. Gangs have threatened his life in prison because of the Bloods and the Crips rivalries in California, and he has spent a lot of time in prison. When you look at this particular case, there are a lot of different stories about really what went down. Some people, and some stories I've read, said that he was called to that location to have a meeting with other people, and when he got there, while he was in the truck, the other 2 individuals, or at least one of them, that's the guy from Training Day who stood there with Denzel, and he said, "Like that? Yeah, just like that, Denzel. T-Bone, I think his name is." I thought he was a very good actor. But apparently that's who was having a problem with Suge. And there's witnesses who say he was punching Suge through the window of the car. So Suge, in an attempt to get out of there, backed the car up fast, didn't know his buddy happened to be right behind the truck, went over him, and then went straight. And, look, I think there's some video on this, and there are the eyewitness testimony. We'll see how it comes down. Parking lots have speed bumps in them. He's in a truck. He's not in a little car. He feared for his life is going to be his testimony. He was in a weakened state because of the bullet wounds and everything that he had. And look, it's a tough defense, but there is a defense there as opposed to some cases where there's no defense. And the eyewitnesses will be great for the defense because some of them will see one thing and some of them will see something else. So that's going to cause a little reasonable doubt in a jury's mind. This case is probably going to go to trial. He cannot take a felony conviction here because that's it. I mean, there's going to be no more Suge Knight. It's going to be bye-bye. He's going to be in prison the rest of his life, and that's one of the reasons the judge pulled the bail package on him because, they thought that, number one, he's a flight risk because he's facing a third strike, and they thought he might try to intimidate witnesses in the case. So the prosecution made a good point of that in the argument, and the judge I think it was a $2 million bail. They pulled it, and he's going to sweat this one out if he lives. I mean, he's in a hospital right now with a fatal blood clot, and that's caused by the bullet wounds that he had before, and he's on all kinds of Coumadin and blood thinners and everything, and they may work and they may not work because if this clot gets into his lungs or anything like that, it's over. I mean, he's going to die in the hospital, and he had a bad one a while ago when he was incarcerated, and it looks like it's repeating itself. So he didn't fake that story about having a panic attack in court. He had a real issue with a blood clot, which is what he has, and he's not a very likable guy. He's a big guy, big, strong guy, and he's got a sordid history, and again, a lot of urban legends about him. But frankly, I don't know what he was doing at that at that taping, and there's some stories that he and Dre have been estranged for over the years, and that someone was trying to reach out to make the peace between the two of them, and that's why he went. And there's going to be a lot of different stories here. So when the truth, the evidence is only what's done in court, not in the news, not in the media, not having these other guys make light of the whole case, because again, one gentleman's dead, the other one was hit by the car, and Suge is facing life in prison on here. So it's very sad. It's tragic. It's tragic all around. Look, when I was with him, he was out on parole, and shortly after that, there was they used to go to the Mike Tyson fights in Vegas at the MGM, and then have the after-fight parties at the club. Well, one night they were coming out of one of the fights through the MGM, and they got in a brawl in the lobby of the MGM. So Suge apparently was in the middle of the brawl on the floor there throwing punches, and he's on probation at this point in time. So they go to violate his probation, And in his probation hearing, he testifies, and he actually tells the judge, Judge, the floor in the lobby was a terrazzo tile, and I wear alligator shoes, and I saw my friend was getting beat up, so I ran to try to save him, and I slipped on the marble floor and fell into the pile. And that's what he testified. So the district attorney said, okay, that's a nice story. Let's go to the videotape. Remember, like Warner Wolf? Let's go to the videotape. Because, the casinos have video everywhere. And sure enough, there he is throwing haymakers in the middle of the pile there. And the judge just basically looked at him and said, Mr. Knight, Marion, Suge Knight, you got to be the dumbest person in the history of the world, because you were doing, I think Death Row was doing over $100 million a year in business at the time, very, very big record company. And
right.
He said, you're done. You're going back in. You're going to finish 7 years in prison. And he went back to prison. So, and it wasn't like one of these Hilton cases or Lindsay Lohan where they go in for 3 hours and come out. He actually did substantial time. So, at the end of the day, he just can't seem to, get away from problems and crimes and being charged. And it looks like this is going to be a bad one. This is a friend of his, apparently, who he killed, and he's going to claim again he was fighting for his life. He didn't intend it. It was negligent. It did not rise to the level of a murder, and it's a tough case. It's a very tough case for him, and it's a sad case for his friend who's dead.